And welcome to another edition of the Batchelor News Radio Show on the Batchelor News Radio Network. And of course, IBM TV is broadcasting this bad boy. We appreciate them for allowing this to happen. It's LA Batchelor. We thank you for joining us wherever you are. Certainly, we appreciate you checking in and tell a friend to tell a friend about this broadcast. Thanks to Mark Lee for producing this bad boy. Appreciate him as always. If we can, I want to hopefully get to my guest. He's a professor at Texas Southern University and a prominent voice on the business and leadership of HBCUs, historically black colleges and universities, and a specialist on the sports culture paradigm. He is Dr. Kenyatta Cavill, and I hope we have Doc on the line. I know he was in waiting, Mark. So if we could pull him up, want to speak with him briefly. This will be sort of a short version of the Batchelor News Radio Show, and hopefully we can get him up. There he is. Always good to have the doctor in the house. You know, looking good. Feeling
Appreciate it. I'm trying to do my part. You're looking good as well. It's good to be on with you face to face. Usually, I'm on and you get my voice. Now everybody gets to see what this looks like. I hope I didn't let them down.
Hey man, my ugly mug, you doing good. So Doc, I want to get into this. I know we're short on time, but both of us,
No problem.
there's a report out, and it was called as an article on a racial reckoning. This Knight Commission report addresses inequality challenges or inequity challenges for Black athletes in HBCUs. And this report really deals with a NCAA engagement into self-examination and to ultimately things being done. It was a 26-page document that 70% of Black students who attend HBCUs come from low-income families, with many coming from secondary education systems where they've been inadequately prepared for college. We see that, and that's not just in funding, but having the courses. You're a professor, taking those courses, math courses specifically, to be ready for colleges, so the A&Ts and Texas Southerns can look at our kids and go, okay, yeah, they have those courses. But the funding, the state colleges, the fact that the matching funds in terms of endowment of funds and things of that nature is a 4-part plan, which we don't have time to get in. We'll talk about this again, that the Knight Commission talked about. But talk about this, because a lot of what people don't understand is that you may have some, and I'll just throw A&T might be in a better position financially to keep their doors open as some other, or whether right. Texas Southern. So a lot of what people don't understand is that the NCAA doesn't treat the HBCUs like the PWIs, predominantly white institutions, as level playing fields, just like if we're going for jobs, just like if we're going into housing and things of that nature. There's not a level playing field. So I know you're familiar with the Knight Commission report, but what say you in some of the issues there and some of maybe the solutions moving forward for HBCUs?
Thank you for that question. And it is extremely important, especially at this time where we see so many people looking a little deeper, or at least we want to believe that they're looking deeper in terms of some of the systemic issues that we've seen for many, many years. And this report, like you said, looked at Black college athletes.
Right.
And to some degree, also colleges, because they specifically speak about historically Black colleges and universities. And that's two lenses that we need to see that as: the individual in terms of Black student athletes, men and women, or institutional. And oftentimes we don't look at that lens as much. We celebrate individuals having some level of success, but we really don't understand or take the time, which I'm glad that you're bringing up, of what does this mean from an institutional perspective. So quickly, there's two ways that most institutions get paid, right? One is from outside sources such as funding from state, to some degree federal resources, even if they're a public institution that we're looking at more so than our private institutions. And then the second way is through students, the number of students and the funds that they pay. Well, the NCA doubles down on that, and they take a weird formula. Instead of distributing the funds equally, which is one component, or even more importantly, equitably, they decide to create a funding strategy, if you would, a formula that allows the programs that are doing the best and get the most funding. The other way I looked at it, they also get the most funding from the NCA, which creates the problem that we're talking about here, the lack of resources. So this is all about looking at equitable ways of how you can make sure institutions, particularly Black institutions, which we know historically haven't gotten their fair share. So we're not even talking about that component of it, is we know that that is an issue, but how do you distribute funds more fairly, such a way that you can have a positive effect on Black college athletes, as well as historically Black colleges and universities, the individuals and the institutions?
You know, one of the things that the Knight Commission talked about in believing that the NCAA should suspend the APR penalties. You know how the APR, and it seems like the penalties are in worst case situations when it comes to our athletes and our HBCUs, for at least 2 years to re-examine the APR system and to reformulate the ASP, the grants that go into it to ensure more support for HBCUs, both in grants and those academic supports. What do you think about that? And it you know, in the report and speaking with HBCU presidents, they said the time is now, like to reach this threshold. It comes down to the funding or the lack thereof, the shortfalls that take place with HBCUs.
Let me unwrap this a little bit for those that are looking at APR, which people are familiar with, the academic progress rate, as they call it. And they have a program associated with accelerated academic success programs, AASP.
Right.
Well, this program was specifically developed to make sure that HBCU programs got funding. Two issues with that is when you looked at the APR funding component of it, is it still goes down to resources. You had to apply for these funds, and you had to have resources in regards to people that could create grant programming and write them up so they could apply for these funds. So if you don't have the resources, you can't write the grants up to apply for the funds. So you had a lot of HBCUs that weren't necessarily getting funds. At first, they were going into it. Well, then you had other resource institutions that wanted to call themselves limited resources. They were saying they couldn't get the funds. They wanted to get some funds. So now they opened it up and had more of this nomenclature they use for limited resource institutions were not just HBCUs. Now they were some of the other institutions, such out of the Southland Conference, to give you specific conferences at the Division I level, along with the SWAC and the MEAC, Southwestern Athletic Conference, and the Mid-Eastern Athletic Conference. But these other institutions had more resources to make sure that they could write the grants to get the funding. So the HBCU still fell short. So yes, they can either eradicate the APR or take a break on it. But what I would say is come off the money, give the resources. It's not that the institutions can't meet the requirements, which is a sad state when you look at it, because there needs to be some level of resources in terms of folks making a minimum benchmark. So it's not like schools are against the benchmark. It's like we know what happens. The institutions that have the funding magically do what? They meet the benchmarks. The schools that do not have the funding, what happens? They don't meet the benchmark. So it's not so much about the benchmark itself, it's the funding associated with it. So we can really take this in any direction in terms of anything that you discuss on your show and many merits. What we find out is African American, specifically blacks and black institutions, do not get the funding associated with what's necessary to be successful in this country and to some degree this world. And so until we change that framework, we're going to run into the same problem with people being able to say, see, they can't meet the benchmarks, and they blame it on something with the individuals and the institutions versus realizing that it's a funding system that is in place that really not only gives the money, but actually strips the resources.
And think about
So,
this too, Doc. So even to a certain extent, like if you're a business owner, right, and you're looking for the grants, but the resources to get the grants aren't there, then how do you get the grants if you don't have the resources? So essentially,
right.
that's what you're saying.
No doubt about it. It's the same thing when people are talking about these loans. And one of the questions is like, well, you need the computer, you needed to be able to download, get all this stuff. And you say, well, yeah, some of these small businesses didn't have access to computers. So how are they gonna get the loan? So you had folks realizing that, and they were finding ways to get to these small businesses to help them actually write the loans. It wasn't that they didn't want the loans. It wasn't that they couldn't have the loans, because they certainly were in positions to be able to show that they needed the loans, but they couldn't literally write for the loan.
Right.
This is the same type of situation. So when you start to strip all these layers away, we've been in a system for so long that has stressed and really aggravated so many different platforms for African American blacks that it really becomes a human rights issue in regards to you stripping these resources away. That makes it tremendously difficult not to compete, but even to be on a field where you can survive. So when you start looking at these things, it is a modern miracle in regards to what the African American and black population has been able to do to thrive in some areas and certainly survive in most of them.
Right, and that's the biggest thing. I did get a comment here just to get your comment real quick.
Sure.
They said there's no talk of our athletes going to our schools. Does the professor think this is a new trend?
Yeah, I think it's a trend, and it's a trend going in the right direction. But let me strip this down: why this is important and why this trend is happening. As we become emerged with more information, in a lot of ways, social media platforms, which is giving us the vehicle, what we're doing to go directly to our listeners that are seeking information, is stripped away that these larger corporations are able to do to control the media sources. So this content media framework is important. These young people are understanding that. They're starting to understand it's not so much the institution I go to, but it's the fact that when I go, I bring a brand with me, and
Hmm.
there is money associated with the brand. So a lot of individuals are reframing this discussion and say, well, let me take my brand to institutions that cater to a market that is more similar to what I'm used to in regards to African American, black people in terms of the black institutions. So it kind of goes back to that old saying when people would say, circulate the dollar in your own community multiple times. It's that framework. If you can adhere to the fact that we still have our community, well, at this fact, we know we still have these institutions. So how do you support the institutions and create your ability to navigate the space about your brand?
A whole conversation, Dr. Ville, as you know, athletes being paid. We know the likeness, all the lawsuits with the people from Ed O'Bannon and all those that looked at that. That's a conversation we know. This modern day, I call it modern day slavery, where the NCAA is the plantation, and a lot of our athletes, not saying other Europeans and others athletes are getting the same thing, but our athletes are a lot of times getting the short end of the stick, especially when you look at this report and what you said in terms of the resources being there. How you want us to compete if we can't even get to the resources to compete? You know what I mean? We're not even there. Forget the finish line. I mean, the starting line. We can't get to
Right.
the starting line. We don't know what the starting line looks like because we don't have the resources to find out what the starting line looks like. So that's a huge issue. And one I want to continue. One final thought I want to get you on a much smaller level, and that is Ben Wallace going into the Naismith Basketball Hall of Fame. As you know, big VU guy. It played there and was dominant. He was a four-time NBA All-Star, great defensive player, won a title with the Pistons. Your thoughts on him going in to the Basketball Hall of Fame and the impact? Again, here is an HBCU kid and graduate um, making his way and putting a stamp on that school, that institution, and HBCUs in itself into the Naismith Basketball Hall of Fame.
First, let me shout out to Bob Dandridge that also got in from Norfolk State.
That's right, Bob
At the
Dandridge.
time he played with Pete Kirkland, he got in by the Elders Committee, which I think is important in terms of Nate. But more specifically, as you talk about Ben Wallace, and in terms of the modern era of what he was able to do. One thing I want to shout out is to this group, Robert Clayton, that does this sports analytics that I'm associated with that I'm very excited about because we have 2 classes at Texas Southern University. But I bring him up to talk about that he had high school students in the urban area work on the data analytics that they use to help support the case for Ben Wallace in terms of looking at it more from a analytical perspective, not just the brand associated with where he went to the school. So bringing the analytics levels that playing field, which goes back to what we're talking about with those resource deprivations. When you take out resources, how do you find a way to aggregate it in such a way that you level the platform, and when people strip it all away, they start to see the real talent equation about what Ben Wallace brought to the table for that Detroit Pistons team and what he did with Defensive Player of the Year, his accolades of all-star appearances. So he was quintessential and measured up quite well and better in many cases than some of his peers that were able to get in. So credit to Ben Wallace, Virginia Union University, the CIAA, Norfolk State, when you talk about Bob Dandridge. And what it does, it puts another bullseye on HBCUs that continue to show their prominence when they are provided with the opportunity, not even a level opportunity, just the opportunity to participate. We still provide stellar stars and gems that literally change the world. So that's the last place I would look at it, is that this is another avenue to brand HBCUs and show what we bring to the table in terms of educating this populace from an educational standpoint as well as an entertainment.
And I would say too, Doc, to add to that, you can real quick that it also brings up the fact that we have to tell our story.
Oh, no doubt.
Our SIDs, sports information directors, got to put it, not just the guys that are maybe going to the NFL or NBA, but the guys who excelled to the pro level to continue to tell their stories, be proud of them, and get into that mindset so we can tell the stories, not just for, like you said, the Bobby Dandridge, but certainly Ben Wallace.
No doubt. That's why we put together, and you're part of this organization, HBCU Pro Sports organization, in terms of understanding the need to tell these stories and keep them in the forefront. A lot of people are looking for these stories. It was amazing when you start looking at all the stories that were out there and how many HBCU fans were looking for information to understand and learn more. A lot of them were talking about their memories of seeing these guys play and at various levels in the tournaments, and what they did in terms of Bobby Dandridge winning a CIAA championship in the tournament and how big that was at that time, and other stars that are in the Hall of Fame. So you're right. It is extremely important for us to understand that we must tell our stories.
And Doc, before you go, I appreciate your time. Please, I know you have a platform out there, not just as what you do at Texas Southern, but your own show. If you can talk about that real quick and talk about how people can follow you and get in touch with you, sir.
Appreciate that opportunity. First, you can follow me on the social media platforms at Dr. Kenyatta Cavil. That's DrKenyattacavil. Again, that's KenYattachCavil. That's Facebook, Instagram, and Twitter. Follow me to get all your latest information on the HBCU sports culture. I call it the Sporting HBCU Diaspora. And we have a show every Tuesday and Thursday from 6 o'clock Central Standard Time. You can check us out on Dr. Ville's Inside the HBCU Sports Lab. Go to YouTube. You can get the recorded version. You check us live on Facebook, BCSN Network.
Did get a question. Predictions on the NBA championship. He said that he loved watching Golden State and the Lakers play. Was rooting against LeBron, but it was a classic game. Any predictions?
Yeah, it was a classic game. I think it's going to be hard to pull against the Lakers and LeBron James. I think they are extremely talented. And much as many people want to give him headache for whatever various reasons, he is truly a talent and seems to find a way to get it done. So I think you have to show in a lot of ways. I think the Lakers are going to find a way to the top.
Yeah, I mean, if they're healthy, it's hard to go against the defending champions. Doc, I appreciate you, sir. God bless. Be well. I'll talk with you very soon, sir. We'll get you back on, okay?
Thanks for having me on. I look forward to it. Take care.
Thanks, Doc.
Well,
Dr. Kenyatta Cavill, always good to have him on. Professor at Texas Southern, of course, he's a prominent voice on business and the sports culture, the paradigm of that, the microcosms as it relate to sports and society. So always good to have him on. Abbreviated edition, Mark, of the Batchelor News Radio show. Any final thoughts as we run out of here?
Yeah, I knew it was an abbreviated edition. Appreciate you coming in and giving us that abbreviated edition. I know you got to go off and do things. Like I said, I was watching that game. It was a classic game, and I'm actually hoping that even though he's going against the Memphis Grizzlies, that Curry can come in as an 8 seed because, like I said, he was still lighting them up, and it was actually a very close game. They only went down by 3 points and actually had a decent sized lead until the third quarter. They did not have the best third quarter in the world, and they even acknowledged that as well. And definitely, if you're going to go against LeBron, you cannot let your guard down at all. So apparently, they even acknowledged that the third quarter was not one of their better efforts in the sense of Golden State. But I'm definitely curious to see now that we're down. I think tonight we'll get the 8 seed for the East, and then definitely tomorrow we'll get the 8th seed for the West. So it's ought to be interesting. And I know that I did not see yesterday who won, but I know that the Hurricanes won their first game. So hockey is going on, and we've got our team, the North Carolina team, involved in it. And they do have a Stanley Cup, at least one under their belt. So hopefully maybe we can get another one under the belt as well. And as I told you before, I know that Doc has been to the championship twice, and I did go to school with Doc Rivers. So maybe we'll get a Philly LA series, since I would love to see Doc at least get to another championship around. And he is the number 1 seed, even though they kind of limped into the playoffs with some losses that I didn't think they needed to have, including the one against Miami. But we'll see how that all goes and how the tournament goes, because definitely there's some hot competition in the East as well, because they've got Brooklyn, they've got, of course, the Knicks, and they've got the Milwaukee Bucks. And, you can't even sleep on the Heat and some of the teams that are in the bottom 4 of those top 8. So it's going to be some intense competitions in basketball. And I'm curious to see how our team does in hockey. And I'm glad to see people competing in our local level, because even here in Durham, the Durham Bulls had a homestand recently. So we do have that going on. And I was talking to my friend Jacoby, who's the voice of the on-the-field antics, and he thinks that the Bulls will win their division. Not necessarily saying they'll win the whole thing, but they will win their division from what he's seen. So hopefully that'll be the case, because, we even had last year minor league baseball off and all of that. So that's just some of my quick thoughts. So I'm glad that we're actually having sports happen right now and all of that. So definitely glad to see that. And by the way, my good friend from Pennsylvania, Tim Sohn, was just coming in and saying hello to the both of us. So he was saying hello, and he's up there in the Pennsylvania area, but not in Philadelphia. He's actually more in the rural area of Philadelphia. So he was seeing us having our conversation and wanted to say hello.
Well, good. Big ups to him. Hopefully he's a Steelers fan like myself. But he's on the right side of the state of Pennsylvania. But real quick, 'cause I had to run. But in the Batchelor household, you have my two sons. One was a Laker fan, one's a Golden State fan. So one was happy, one was not. But the Golden State fan, my oldest son, I told him, look, you beat Memphis, you're still in it. Of course, you get Utah in the next round at the top seed, but you're still in it. Anything can happen with Steph Curry. So, but Lakers are healthy. They are definitely the team to beat out west, and in the East, like you said, it's Philly or Brooklyn's to lose. I'm hoping it's our Sixers to get it done, and it'd be nice to see Doc Rivers play the Clippers in
Yep.
the finals so he can get a little payback as the Clippers, let him go and all of that thing. But we'll see. It's going to be a great playoffs. We'll be talking about that later on this evening on the show too. So.
Oh yeah, definitely. So I know you got to bounce to your meeting. By the way, Tim did say hello, and he was letting you know that he's 3 hours from Philly. So like I said, he is a Pennsylvania person, and up there 3 hours. His wife is actually an educator up in that area as well. So you've got another fan because he does follow a lot of the things that I'm involved with. So now he's definitely joined your fan club as well. So I know you've got some folks in the audience like Tracy Goodwin Heal and Sonia Collins and Rhonda White that have been watching as well. So we've got some fan clubs going for LA Batchelor. We might have to start an LA Batchelor fan club.
Well, I don't know about that. Would have the Bachelor News show followers who call it that. And incidentally, if you can, the shameless plug, we're on tonight from 6 to 8, and people could tune in at 646-929-0130. If you're on our e-blast, you know when, but we'll shoot email out to you. And Mark, I appreciate your time as always, my friend, and we will do
I'm
this
glad
again
to do
on
it. I know you're
Thursday.
here to bounce. I did have just one very quick question to take one quick answer. I just recently joined, and there's sports things on that conversation as well because for a long time they weren't available to iPhone. They were available to iPhone, but not to Android. So I am now a member of the Clubhouse family. I don't even know if Tim's a member of the Clubhouse family, but are you a member of the Clubhouse family? Because if not, we got to get you on Clubhouse so we can get some of those sports shows and sports people involved because they do have various clubs and all of that, and some of them are sports oriented. So I just recently joined the Clubhouse community, and that's that whole lovely phone app and service that even has celebrities on there because I've stumbled across some folks that are definitely known in their field and would have that celebrity status.
Well, I have to take a look at that some more to see if I'm going to be in that clubhouse with you, the great Mark Lee. But we'll see. I appreciate you, my friend.
No problem. So we're going to get on out of here, and we'll be back next week with some more commentary about definitely sports and definitely things revolving around politics, social justice, and a lot of the other great things that LA Batchelor talks about. So we're definitely looking forward to that and everything. And by the way, Tim was saying that he's recently joined Clubhouse as well. So he hasn't done much on it yet, but he is a member of that group. So we're going to get on out of here. But, I've got another show that I've got to get ready to do at the 6 o'clock hour with my good friend, Coco McMillan. So maybe Tim will check that out as well, because that show revolves around gospel music and music in general. So I'm going to get on out of here. I know that LA's already gotten out of here. So let's get ready to wrap this up, and we'll see you next week on this show where we talk about sports and other issues as well.